This week, Canada becomes the first country to enforce health warnings on individual cigarettes, starting with king-size cigarettes, and within a couple of years, every one sold in the country. But will it be an effective deterrent? Rob Cunningham is Senior Policy Analyst with the Canadian Cancer Society. Rob, thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Amanda. Good to be with you.
Let's start there. I mean, obviously it hasn't happened anywhere else, so we can't look to another jurisdiction. But do we think this will work to keep people from smoking?
Absolutely, and we're thrilled that this measure is now being implemented. It's innovative. It costs Health Canada nothing. And based on 25 studies that have been done in Canada and other countries, it is going to be effective to reduce smoking and ultimately cancer and other diseases. And the tobacco industry opposed it, which is a signal we're in the right direction. If they wouldn't oppose it, we wonder what impact it would have on sales.
Rob, this may sound trivial, but one of the first things most of us think when we hear this is the ink itself adding to the harm to smokers. How do we know that that's not the case?
Well, just to note that the final version of what's being in the market, the warning message is only going to be over top of the filter. So it will not be burned during the smoking process. Some of the initial options that Health Canada consulted on did have it on the long sort of rod portion of the cigarette, but that's not in the final regulations.
It all, of course, brings to mind, Rob, that we have this very complicated relationship with tobacco. It's still a legal product. It's still marketed, albeit not the way it once was. But really, we wish that nobody would smoke. It kills everybody who does it. Therefore, are we moving in the right direction? Are we moving too slowly because we're sort of addicted to the tax revenue we get from these products?
Well, we are moving in the right direction. But of course, we would like to move faster. There's an objective set by the federal government of under 5% tobacco use by the year 2035. The most recent data is 12%. That doesn't include vaping or youth vaping, which is a whole entire other issue. But we need to do far more. Whether it's taxes or minimum age 21 instead of age 19 or 18, 21 PEI is done. Reduce the number of retail outlets. We can do a lot.
I guess I want to ask you about that also, because we do see even big tobacco recognizing that this form of tobacco delivery is on its way out. They're very focused on newer ways to do that. Are we letting that kind of slip under the radar and letting vaping get away from us, for instance?
Unfortunately, youth vaping is about 4 times the rate of youth smoking. The regulations that we have in place are inadequate. We're not learning fast enough the lessons that we already know from tobacco regulation. 730,000 Canadians vape who have never smoked. That's not supposed to be happening. So there's an opportunity to do far more in that area.
What would you like to see? What are you advocating in that area?
We can do more in terms of taxes. Also, the federal government has a draft regulation to ban flavors other than tobacco flavor. 6 provinces and territories have done that. Other countries have done that. That's something that the federal government could do quickly. Also, the minimum age 21 would be an effective measure. We've seen that experience in the United States with 30 states having done that. That's going very well. But we really need to focus in preventing a new generation of kids becoming addicted.
Do you hope for a future where there is zero tobacco consumption? And do you expect this possible?
Yes and yes. We do have this objective of tobacco-free society in the long term. It's not feasible today to ban cigarettes outright because of contraband, because of people being addicted. But there are so many things that we've not yet implemented. And we've come a long way. In 1965, 50% of Canadians smoked, down to the 12%. We have 46,000 Canadians who die each year, still the leading preventable cause of disease and death. We need to do everything we can.
Rob, so good to have you for this. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Amanda. Thanks very much.
Rob Cunningham is Senior Policy Analyst with the Canadian Cancer Society. Time for the takeaway and losing the signal. This week, Ontario solidified a plan to keep cell phones out of classrooms in the province. Starting in September, all schools in Ontario will be governed by the same rules, which will keep phones out of sight on silent during class hours. For older kids, grades 7 and up, the devices may be used between classes. Oh, and while they were at it, they banned vaping in schools too. If this all sounds like a colossal amount of common sense, you might be surprised to learn that it's actually controversial. Not just with the kids who would rather stay on their devices either. Teachers worry about having to police and enforce the rule, and some parents apparently see it as an overreach. But let's agree that focus is a central part of learning, and that everything we know about how our brains interact with handheld devices tell us they distract us. The very fact that there's any question about whether vaping at your high school desk is copacetic should be enough to tell us we've lost the plot. Kids will always and have always find ways to ignore a teacher, but leaving them with some of the most addictive devices known to humankind seems like a bad way to set them up for success. Interestingly, other provinces don't have a similar broad plan, maybe because they've allowed actual teachers to take control of classrooms and do what's best for students. There has been some pushback that suggests removing the phones means kids won't have proper instruction on the devices themselves, that incorporating this technology into the education system makes good sense and removing it leaves young people vulnerable to the technology. But it's hard to give that argument much merit. A teacher can instruct about tech, media, and how we interact with them without having personal devices on hand. Let's remember that these same students will one day soon work at jobs that similarly frown upon multitasking with our phones when we should be doing our work. Why not start early with the lesson that doing one thing well is often the best approach? My takeaway? Taking phones out of kids' hands is an obvious thing to do. That we needed a rule saying we should do it is the only alarming part. That's Taking Stock for this week. I'm Amanda Lang. Thanks for being with us.